Welcome, everyone. We are continuing on from our series of All About Horses, and I'm so fortunate to be interviewing Michael Campbell again. He's an equine expert out of Utah, and he will be sharing fascinating science on a new game for horses and horse health. So welcome, Michael. You're going to be sharing with us the missing link in science. So what is that missing link?
Well, the missing link has been Nrf2 science. It's not something that the average veterinarian or anybody concentrates on, and it's important. It's probably, when it comes to inflammation in horses and performance in horses, it's probably one of the most important things at the cellular level that you can do. And you can do it from the out, by supplementing, and you can change that level of oxidative stress quite quickly. You can manage the cell, and you can remove that excess oxidative stress if the body, by the body's own self function. And so oxidative stress is the beginning of everything. If it isn't controlled, that's where the inflammation starts. That's where it turns into osteoarthritis and everything else that comes about as a disease, and ultimately it's how you age. So keeping that oxidants, I call it antioxidant equilibrium balance. That's the important thing to do, and you can do it. You can, if you're paying attention and they're getting the right supplementation, you can, if you've got a horse that's got any kind of problems, you can pretty much pull them out of it just by controlling their oxidative stress. It's amazing. I've done it over and over and over. Walked horses, I call it walking horses out of hell. They're not moving, they're arthritic, and they have they might be pretty lazy. They're not wanting to do much, and it's because they've got a buildup of oxidative stress. And you go in there and exercise them a little and get some antioxidant in them, and man, they come alive, and they do it quickly because their system moves fast. So
this oxidative stress, is this something that happens overnight? And it just manifests all of a sudden? A horse is showing symptoms of oxidative stress?
Well, it can happen overnight, kind of, if they have the right kind of stress, and but it normally, it's just like every other kind of a disease, like cancer, like anything. It builds over time. You have a little bit of oxidative stress, and then it gets a little bit worse, and then it builds a little bit worse, and there's degeneration, and after a while, you've got a problem. So, and it can be beyond fixing. But it normally you can pull them around in a horse. And the same thing really with people. We're all mammals. It kind of works the same in everybody. So in this case, in the Nrf2 pathway, we don't know how much oxidative stress we can remove from a horse quickly by using supplementation, but we do know that in humans. But in horses, I don't think anybody's ever really measured it, but it removes tons, because you can see the difference in the horse real quick a lot of times.
So then activating this Nrf2 pathway is a way to regulate that oxidative stress?
Yeah, you can boost the immune system. There's no doubt about that. And, it does a lot of things. It increases stamina, increases endurance. When you're doing a lot of performance stuff, they'll have a quicker recovery time. They'll have, if that oxidative stress is out of there, it'll reduce muscle stress. It'll increase, I've written that it'll increase their agility. And they'll have the wonderful thing, that you need in a horse is focus and concentration, and especially in performance horses, and it'll bring a lot of that around. and and that's the way you control the inflammation, and they call it inflammaging. Now, horses die from inflammation in the end. I mean, I guess people do kind of too, but you know, a horse that's how he dies. He inflames to death. He finally just gets so inflamed that he dies. But they call it inflammaging, and if you can control that inflammation, you can change the quality of that horse's life a ton.
And because they're, I think you've told me before that their systems are so quick in reacting because they're plant-based, that it could go both ways, good and bad.
Well, if you use a completely 100% natural plant-based supplement with with horses, it's the way to go, because their system does work very quickly. I mean, they pump a lot of blood, they suck in a lot of air, and they're already vegetarians. So, you know, if it's plant-based, it just fits right in, and you can give, you know, and it doesn't take much. It just takes daily, kind of a daily thing, because those micro minerals that they need. And it's like selenium, and like everything, if they got the right things, they'll come right around. The problem, of course, always is getting enough nutrition.
The right balance. So then, so you've identified oxidative stress as the root of the problem, and where does it come from?
Comes from everywhere. I mean, oxidative stress comes from just exercise, but it'll come, I mean, all the things that horses are subject to, you know, the physiological stress from being confined. If you're a performance horse, the lights in a place, the noise, any kind of constraints, you know, being in a stall, horses next to them that they don't know, or a horse that next to them that they don't like. And then there's physical stress, of course, you know, from the exercise, and especially performance horses, because you travel with them, you haul them down the road thousands and thousands of miles, and it's stressful. You know, and they're a flight and fight animal. They're not used to being that, you know, that. But some horses now, I mean, I call them bulletproof. They're used to it. They can do it, but it's still, I don't care how you do it, you're going to have oxidative stress. And then you have all the environmental stress as we go along. You know, horses, it depends on their environment around them. They can be sick from if you live next to a highway and have thousands of cars go by there every day, that'll affect them. Any kind of air pollution affect them. A different odor, if there comes about a different odor, they'll notice it immediately. All kinds of noise, and of course any kind of predators. But that's environmental stress. And then of course the nutritional stress, which is it can be from the water, you know, and they have to process anything you put in their body that's foreign. If there's drugs involved, or any kind of fillers or synthetics that are put in any kind of their feed, or anything that comes about. And then of course in the hay and in the grain, the pesticides and the herbicides, which are probably the most deadly thing to a horse of anything, probably affects them worse than anything, because it's everywhere, and it can be in the water, it can be in the air, it can be in the feed they're eating. It comes from every direction. So,
Well, we're learning more and more about glyphosate affecting horses, dogs, people, the planet. So that's, yeah, I know you've done a series on glyphosate. So if anybody's interested, we can point them in that direction, because that's a full talk in itself.
well, the glyphosate thing, I mean, you can talk about a million chemicals, because there's a million of them out there affecting everything, but glyphosate is it's just because of the volume of it that makes it so, you know, bad.
Well, it's sort of the poster child now, isn't it, for pesticides and herbicides?
Yeah.
It's not
There's
the only one.
There's 9.2 million horses in the United States. And the amazing thing about that is 1/10 of those horses colic in every 12-month period. So there's a reason for that colic. I mean, it's the environment that they're in. But You know, that does happen. And, you know, it's written by the University of Kentucky and a university that I read it in a study in Australia, that 50% of the horses over 14 or 15 years old will experience Cushing's, some level of Cushing's disease. And Cushing's disease comes in a lot of levels, and it's always bad. And they say 60% of all competition horses have ulcers, and that's probably true. The race horses, there's 90 to 95% they have ulcers, and there's a lot of reasons that horses have ulcers, but they do. So
Well, people get ulcers, yeah, from stress.
Well, it comes from stress, and it mainly comes from nutrition and what you're eating and how your body is handling it. Because, you know, I mean, just about everything involves inflammation, and an ulcer in the gut is the first inflammation, and of course glyphosate is the first causer, because if they're eating glyphosate every day, they're getting an antibiotic every day, all day, because it's registered as, I mean, it was patented once as an antibiotic, and after a while it kills all the good stuff and all the good microbes and feeds the bad, so then you end up with ulcers. So
Well, we're seeing it in competitive horses, and you know, race horses are competitive horses, but dressage too, and hunting. So hunting and hunter jumpers, that's still competitive, I suppose.
it's all about their environment, how they're, you know, where they're housed and how much they're exercised and everything else. It's like everything. We have to, horses that don't get exercise pretty steady and don't get to eat on a, you know, a long-term base, all day kind of, they're foragers, and they're meant to forage for 6-8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. And if that doesn't happen, of course that changes everything, and it just depends on, every kind of horse is affected in some way.
So race horses, for instance, they would be fed naked oats because of the higher protein level.
Well, they should be. I think they should be. They don't use, the trouble with oats is like everything else in America, especially, you have a hard time finding oats that don't have glyphosate in them. But it's probably, as a whole grain, it's still pretty whole. I mean, the problem is we're not feeding whole grains. We're feeding, like, it's the same thing with people. We're eating, you know, it comes down, the worst thing is white flour, you know, but it comes down the same thing with horses. They're eating this grain that has been modified, and, you know, we used to have 4-foot tall wheat. Now we got a, you know, 18-inch, 24-inch tall wheat at the most, and the gluten content has changed, the type of gluten has changed, everything is different, and it's hard to digest, and it's hard on horses. And, you know, if you could feed them whole grain, absolute whole old ancient wheat and ancient grains, you have a different horse than you do with the regular grains. So,
well, that comes down to the nutrition in the whole grain, whereas once it's been roller milled instead of stone ground, you know, that changes it. And I see that in people. I've done a series, What's So Bad About Bread, explaining the loss of nutrients when you get away from the whole grain. We have managed to find a really good source here for organic naked oats that we were having managed to get for people. But you know, the horse industry gets the first dibs on that, so we're very fortunate.
that's awesome.
And you say the number one most infectious disease in horses is respiratory. Is that?
Well, they have those great big old lungs, and, you know, whatever is out there, whatever they're breathing is gonna go through them, and all the dust and all the whatever is gonna go into their body, and their body has to deal with it. And you got those great big lungs, and so they do these, you know, they do these lung treatments. Their lungs bleed because they're weakened, and they're weakened by the environment. And the end of those capillaries in those lungs are thin, and, you know, and a lot of times when a horse, even a barrel horse, he does one run, and, you know, there'll be a little bit of blood. And same thing with these race horses, and they use a thing called Lasix, and Lasix is not good for horses. But they do it to keep their lungs from bleeding.
Mm.
Because if they taste blood when they're running, like a racehorse, if he's halfway through that race and he tastes a little bit of blood, he's going to back off a little bit. He's not
Oh,
going to run like he should. But
interesting. Interesting. And then
but
there's some other issues here.
everything comes from it. Everything comes from that oxidative stress. Laminitis. Laminitis is just the direct result of oxidative stress, inflammation, sore hocks and heels, their nervousness, hormonal issues. It all comes from, it's all based on oxidative stress. All comes from there.
So the root cause of laminitis then is oxidative stress.
Too much toxicity of free radicals. Yeah. Yeah, well, we've talked about laminitis and founder a lot, but it's it's a huge problem, and it's a problem every day. I mean, if you're feeding them wrong and feeding them too much, you're going to get a little bit of laminitis, or you get a lot of laminitis. A horse is, the crazy thing about a horse is if he gets into the granary, he'll eat himself to death. And he will back off of hay when he gets full. He'll, those things. But when he gets that treat, boy, he'll. But like if he gets green grass in the spring, eats too much green grass, and you'll see it. You'll see the reaction, and you'll see this little line around his hoof. And a horse that's got 4 or 5 of those little lines around their hoof, that they probably had a little bit of oxidative stress each time, and that hoof grows out every year or so.
So that's something that's sort of a warning sign then.
It is a warning sign. Yeah.
And then the oxidative, maybe before the horse goes lame. Would you have those rings before the horse goes lame?
Yeah, usually it'll, each time that little bit of oxidative stress happens, even if it's just a little bit, it weakens those lamina that holds that hoof, that hoof cap on there and on that hoof, and just a little weak, a little weak, a little weak, a little weak, and eventually you've got a problem.
So once that symptom would appear, it would be a good time to start managing the oxidative stress then before it worsens. I suppose you can sort of reduce that then if you catch it early enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, you keep that out of there and keep those horses, good nutrition. That hoof will completely rebuild. But it's the separation of, that's what I said, the separation of the lamina that connects the hoof wall to the coffin bone. Most common affliction, and that's the most common affliction in horse hooves and horses. And horses, they're dependent on those feet. They have those 4 little sticks that holds that big old body up, and if those feet aren't in good shape,
just amazing.
So then we talked about it. It's just the aging of horses, the inflammation of horses, and the inflammation of people. We all inflame ourselves to death, and especially now with the kind of foods we're eating and everything else, you end up with degeneration. So, and once you have a little bit of degeneration in a horse's foot and leg and hock or whatever, he's not much good anymore for what you want him for. But anyway,
and I know we featured Zamora on a previous session, and I guess she sort of became arthritic, and then because the lack of mobility led to sort of edema in her abdomen, and the weight of that pulled her spine down. It was sort of a knock-on effect. I suppose it was gradual, but it just led to, gosh, she was obviously in pain. And I guess horses can't express early on. It's only when it really manifests that they're in dire straits that something's going on. How could someone, is there an easier way to notice when a horse is beginning the signs of oxidative stress?
Well, they've all got it. I mean, it's a daily management. It's a keeping track of the horse and keeping him healthy. You know, it's if something. The thing about it is, if something goes real wrong, and he's in stress, and an infection starts somewhere in that horse, some kind of an infection. I mean, then you've got a real problem real quick. I mean, you could lose a horse in 72 hours or less. When that occurs. So you gotta just, if you're using horses, you know, and they're a lot, it's like people, you got to keep track, and you got to feed them right and take care of them, because they will degenerate just like anything else. And the better you take care of them, the less they degenerate, and the more they know, the more you have the right nutrition and the right, remove that oxidative stress out of there. If you know how to do that, which is pretty easy these days because we have supplements to do that. Keeping that mitochondria, there you go. That mitochondria, that's the source of all energy, and you keep that clean. And people think mitochondria, oh, there's a mitochondria in each cell. Well, there's 200 mitochondria average in the cells, and some cells have 2,000 mitochondria in them. I mean, you can't believe that one cell could have that much of a thing in them. But that's where all the energy is produced, and that's the glucose that controls the glucose and the energy in and the energy out, and keeping the mitochondria healthy is the trick.
How does that balance with oxidative stress?
Well, if you keep the oxidative stress out of the cell, you have healthy mitochondria. If you have the bad oxidative stress, I mean, some oxidative stress is good, but the bad oxidative stress, if you keep that superoxide dismutase and catalase and that glutathione at the right levels, at good levels, you'll have a healthy cell, and your mitochondria will be healthy, and you'll have, the horse will have the energy and the health that he should have. It's that mitochondria is it's the powerhouse of the cell, and it's what makes everything cook in there. So
balancing that oxidative stress is several mechanisms being balanced to achieve that.
Exactly.
So how do we balance that oxidative stress then?
Well, how do you balance oxidative stress is everything being normal, but it's very hard to balance oxidative stress today without some supplementation, because we don't really have the micro minerals in our entire nutritional system that we once had. In fact, we're probably down 50, 60, 70% over 100 years ago. So it's kind of a new game. That's why I call it a new game. To send in that messenger to remove that oxidative stress has become more and more important. And to teach people how to do that, it's not very hard, is really important. And I think just about everybody needs to know how to do it these days, because of our lack of nutrition and what we didn't have before, what we had before and we don't have now. And so if you do that, you you control everything: the fibrosis, the inflammation, the oxidation. Oxidation is rust. I mean, antioxidant, that's why they call it antioxidant. If you keep that oxidation out of there, you keep that cell from rusting. Or it's just like rust on a piece of metal outside. When the sun hits it and the rain and the moisture hits it, it rusts. And the same thing happens in your body, basically.
So when we're breathing in oxygen, which we need, it just over time, it's just like exposing maybe, well, I cut an apple this morning to put in my porridge, and I left it a little bit long and it started turning brown. So is
Same thing.
that exposure to the oxygen. So Tupperware was onto something when they created those little containers that we could take the air out of our food containers. But we can't take the air out of our bodies because we need oxygen. And then you're saying we can, I mean, the antifibrotic and anti-inflammatory, that sounds, I mean, that's just that our body can regulate that.
Absolutely. Oxidation is the part of the process that enables the body to transform nutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins into energy. So that oxidation is what, that oxidant, that oxygen is what makes everything happen. And you get that, like you've heard over and over, that in a high oxygenated cell, things like cancer can't happen because it's there, it's correct, it's got everything correct. So,
well, we know that cancer thrives on sugar.
It's all about
cancer likes a low oxygen environment. Quite a lot that we know about cancer. And then it's also, I guess, the result of the inflammation.
Horses have a hard time with, just like people, with sugar. I mean, you can't.
Do horses get cancer? Do horses actually get cancer?
Oh yeah, it's controlling that. Yeah, a horse will get cancer. Not like humans quite, because they're not the garbage eaters that we are. But if they're in a bad environment, they can end up with a lot of I can't think of what you call them, but they end up with a lot of cancer. Dogs do. Dogs are just, it's awful.
Yeah, we've seen just growing numbers of cancer in
Dogs
dogs.
will have 7 times more cancer than people. They've gone to one in every other dog will end up with cancer now, they claim.
The statistic is every other person. So
yeah, we're getting there.
So we need to really regulate that oxidative stress then to stop cancer.
Well, basically, if you're regulating oxidative stress and you've got it going right, you probably won't have any kind of disease. You probably have the healthiest immune system out there. But that's
very helpful right now.
Not the easiest thing to do. I mean, you can't pour gasoline on the fire. You can regulate the oxidative stress, but if you're still feeding it garbage and still throwing synthetics and chemicals at it, you're just marching in place. Maybe you can kind of control it a little bit, but you're slowly going to lose ground. You have to clean up your act in a lot of ways. And of course, if you do the Nrf2 supplements the right way, you produce a lot more glutathione, and glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body, and that you get everything from that. If you've got the right amount of glutathione and it's not being blocked by anything, you're going to have a lot of benefits. It's going to be your detoxer. It's going to strengthen your immune system. It's going to decrease the inflammation. It's going to feed your muscles, and you're going to be able to, grow muscle tissue, and if that glutathione is correct and in good supply, you're going to have a lot more energy and stamina and endurance. There's no doubt about it.
Now, I've seen glutathione advertised as a supplement, a standalone supplement.
Yep.
But you're saying that our body produces glutathione.
It'll produce many times more, 300% or more. Your body itself will produce glutathione at a much higher rate than that. If you take outside glutathione and compared to what your body makes, it would be like 300% to 10%.
Mm.
I mean, I'm just using those numbers. I don't know if that's an exact number, but it's a lot. So
Well,
yeah,
then,
your body producing glutathione is a wonderful thing, and you can do that by stimulating that, just by stimulating that Nrf2 pathway.
well, then taking the supplement as well, I would think, the activation is just a few hours. Your body metabolizes it, and then it's just, essentially goes down the drain, doesn't it? We eliminate it.
Yep,
But anything our body produces,
it's constant. Yeah, and it's a different kind of. I mean, it's a different. It's got everything that it needs to go with it, so that it works. Going from the outside, it's got to find its way, and it's different.
mhm. Well, in a supplement of glutathione, I mean, we can take forms of vitamin C that our body, is bioavailable for our body, but glutathione would have to be synthetic, wouldn't it? As a
Well,
supplement?
I think it's mostly synthetic. Exactly.
Yeah.
So in horses, it's a waste of time to use a synthetic. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, I think they do in some things, but vitamins, minerals, everything that's synthetic, you don't really get any. You might get a little bit of a benefit but overall, you get little to no benefit.
Not really worth the money
You
for
can't replace God's 118 minerals and vitamins that come from the earth. You can't replace them. I mean, that's the problem with what we've done. We've tried to replace them, and man thinks he's smarter than God, and he's not. I mean, it all comes back down to natural nutrition, and it's especially in horses.
I'm hearing that a lot. I'm hearing that a lot now with what we're dealing with. So back to, again, worth a mention. I I can't talk about it enough when I'm speaking with people about glyphosate in any living thing. But just a quick word on glyphosate again in regards to horses.
Well, it does I mean, it changes the physiology of a horse. It changes the physiology of anything living. I mean, it all it changes the transportation of the important things in the body, like sulfur. It messes with the amino system. It messes with the microbes in your gut brain axis. It's such a small, and it's a chelator, and it grabs a hold. It's a positive and a negative. It picks up the minerals and carries them where they're not supposed to go, and it'll carry them through the blood-brain barrier. It'll carry them, into the pineal gland and the endocrine system, and it just messes up everything. And it's different. It depends on what you're feeding them and what they're eating and what they're drinking, and it's a little bit different in every horse, every person. And that's why you have 60 years ago you had 8 autoimmunes, and now you've got 118. And it's the big push on all that changed all that a lot are chemicals. And this one is predominant because it's used in such massive amounts. I mean, we spray like 220 million pounds of it on it. We drowned America in it every year. And it's in the water, it's in the air, it's everywhere. So, and then they put it in the plants. I mean, it's in like the alfalfa. They have, the GMO alfalfa, the genetically modified alfalfa. It's in the sugar beets, and they feed as a bulk item. They feed these horses a lot of sugar beet. What's left over after the sugar's taken out of them. They give them that stuff, and that stuff is full of glyphosate. So it spikes everything. It changes everything. But it's changed the physiology of every living thing in America, and really, it's changed. A horse that's away from it and doesn't get fed a lot of hay and grain and different stuff, and he's just out there, he's got plenty of nutrition from the grass. He's the luckiest horse in America.
Oh,
But those other horses that are in that environment where it comes around, it's not good.
Well, we want to get the word out and help people realize the presence of oxidative stress and the causes of it, the effects of
Well,
it.
the crazy thing about glyphosate, it just is another word, is that I have called like the University of Kentucky on it. I read I'd read a study that they did on a certain thing, maybe whatever, and I read this study and I think, I wonder why they didn't consider checking those tissues for glyphosate. If those tissues have a high glyphosate content, parts per million or billion, it would definitely be change the outcome of that study. You'd have to look at it differently, but they don't. It's a very few have. They are a little more now, I think, but it's I call it the ghost molecule. It's there and it's everywhere, and it's not considered. But anyway.
Well, we know why it's not considered, because we're so highly regulated by the manufacturers of.
Yeah, we're brainwashed by them. They know how to cover it all up, but they've done a master job of covering up the glut. But they've got caught a little bit here lately with this cancer lawsuits and things. But anyway, in a human, Nrf2 pathway activate with Nrf2 pathway activation, you end up with you can reduce oxidative stress 40% in 30 days, and that's been measured over and over and over, and it's absolute. I mean, you can do that with the right supplement, and you can increase that glutathione by 300%, and their average on catalase increase is 54%, and superoxide dismutase 30%. So, and they've done a lot. I mean, that's not just talk. There's a whole bunch of studies on PubMed that'll show you that, peer-reviewed studies and independent studies, and it's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you, Michael, very much. This has covered quite a lot. Anyone who is in possession of this video has been introduced to it by someone who works with horses, cares about horses, maybe treats horses. Get back with them to find out more about that Nrf2 activation, because it is so vast and broad that there's more than we would possibly cover in an interview that would be short enough for anybody to have time to listen to. It's really revolutionary.
I'm not a veterinarian, and I'm just a researcher, and I'm just a messenger. I've done a lot of research, and I've messed with horses a bunch especially with this Nrf2 activation and removing oxidative stress. And I mean, that was in the back of my head when I was running down the road. I did talks in front of over 200 different horse groups, in front of veterinarians and everybody. And my only goal is to make people aware of this science and of glutathione. I mean, not of glutathione, of glyphosate. What glyphosate does to our environment and and what it's doing to our horses and all animals, really. And so that it's we have to know about it more. Everybody's got to understand that if one of the biggest things you're doing when you're selecting food to put in your mouth is, you better know that if it's got glyphosate in it, because that glyphosate is going to affect you. In the end, it's going to be your undoing if you don't understand it and you do it over and over. It's like pouring gasoline on the fire. So, and I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything special. I'm just telling you that you need to be made aware of it, and you need to understand it somewhat if you want to maintain health. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting with your health till the day you die. Your quality of life will not be the same as it would if you understood glyphosate.
When there are tests for glyphosate levels, urine tests, we can put you in touch with a laboratory, the lab in the UK, in the US. I'm in the UK, Michael's in the US. Also test for oxidative stress, and we can point you to labs that can test for that if you're concerned. and how to monitor that. So please just do get back with the person who shared this video with you and let them know what you'd like more information about, and we can put you in touch with published peer-reviewed studies. But thank you so very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.